Welcome to the Holiness Today podcast. On September 19th, Nazarene Youth International celebrated 100 years of ministry. Earlier this month, I was able to connect with NYI Director David Gonzalez. Please listen to how God called him to youth ministry and how God is still calling him to equip the next generation of leaders in the Church of the Nazarene. Dr. Gonzalez, welcome to the Holiness Today podcast. Very excited to have you with us today. To start us out, could you just briefly kind of give us a little bit about your testimony, how God has called you to the role that you're in today, serving in the Church of the Nazarene?
Well, Nate, thanks for the invitation. And I was born and raised in Mexico. I was born in Mexico City. I grew up in Veracruz and state of Mexico. And I'm the middle child of a pastoral family. And I had the spiritual influence of my parents because they were both pastors. They served as pastors in a pastoral ministry. Now they are retired. They live in Mexico City. But having that influence, I grew up learning about God and also loving God. But there was a crucial moment in my life, and it happened when I was 13 years old, and my pastor at that time invited me to be part of a Bible quizzing team. So honestly, at that time, it wasn't interesting for me, kind of attractive. But at the same time, there was a girl there at the youth group that said out loud, "Oh, Pastor, don't invite David. He doesn't have the discipline to study the Bible," and something like that. For me, that was like, okay, count me in because I want to show her that I can do this. And well, it's how that started because one night I was studying the Bible. I was reading the Epistle of Paul to the Philippians. It was chapter 2, and I was reading that part of the chapter when where it says that Jesus set aside his privilege, being God, and he took on the status of a human, as a servant, as a slave. And for me, it was like, wow, he really loves us. He really loves me, and that's why my parents loved him that way. So that night, I told God, I want to have the same relationship with God, with you. I want to recognize Jesus Christ as my Savior, as my Lord. I want to experience the same thing that my parents are living it out. So for me, that was a crucial moment. And with that said, I continue being involved in ministry in my local church. For me, that was something normal. But I can tell you that after that night, my motivation was different. There was something different that I could feel it. I knew it. And of course, I got involved in Bible quizzing. I love it, but not just Bible quizzing, other youth ministry activities, events, especially connected to music, worship, and service projects. And eventually, I was helping organizing events, camps, and all that kind of stuff, community outreach in my city, in Jalapa, Veracruz, in the Mexico Gulf District. And, especially I was focusing in youth because I want others to experience the same thing that I was experiencing. So that's when I understood that God was calling me into ministry and specifically youth. But also at the same time, I just realized that I needed to be better prepared or equipped in terms of like a theological education and other tools too. So that's why when I formally started my my theological education, and I was about to complete my college degree in business administration because that's my business degree. And then after that, I continued studying theology in the seminary in Mexico. So kind of like pastoral ministry and admin responsibilities have been connected since then. So it has been kind of that set of skills or yeah. So that's me. But also there is another event that for me was a defining moment, and it was in 1997. It was the General Assembly in San Antonio, Texas. I was attending as an NYI delegate. At that time, it was called the General NYI Convention. Now it's called Global NYI Convention. So I was representing my district. And in that event, I also was invited to serve in a service project, in a ministry project. Now, this time during the General Assembly, we had Love Your Neighbor. At that time, it was One Heart, Many Hands. So I was invited to serve. At that time, I didn't speak English at all. So for me, it was kind of like a cultural shock. But even though I didn't speak the language, we all spoke the same language, and it was love. It was about serving others. So for me, it was a meaningful moment. So when I transitioned from the ministry project to the convention, I knew God was speaking to me. And during the evening services, actually one of the evening services, it was an NMI service, that God, confirmed his call to serve him in a full-time ministry. I didn't know at that time if it was pastoral ministry or cross-cultural ministry, but I knew that it was full-time ministry. I remember I was wearing headphones because I needed interpretation. And I know the preacher started the sermon, and I just took off the headphones because I was having a conversation with God. And it, eventually, when I knew that I needed to respond yes to the Lord, I put the headphones back. And it was at the exact moment that the preacher was inviting uh, those who wanted to respond to God's call to serve Him to come to the altar or to the front of the, the, the platform. And I remember missionaries coming from the audience, holding a cross. And it was kind of like the invitation to take those crosses and be part of like God's mission. And for me, it was a meaningful moment. From that moment, I knew that God wanted me to be involved in full-time ministry. And I went back to my city, my local church, and I was ready to serve. And it has been 26 years now. And the commitment is stronger than ever. And I'm just so grateful of being part of what God is doing. Through His
So
church.
after General Assembly in San Antonio in '97, you went on and started working immediately in the local church, or did you go
No,
to Bible school, or what happened right after that?
well, at the time I was still studying at college. I think I was completing my last year at college. So it's when I also realized, as I said previously, that I needed to be better equipped in terms of like a theological education. So I knew, actually I shared with my dad, and that I was responding to that call from God. And I remember that I told my dad, it's like, I'm, I'm quitting. I'm leaving college. I'm going to go to the seminary. And my dad said, no, you need to complete your college studies. And after that, you can do whatever you want when I do. And I know he was happy for him, what I just shared with him. And I was involved in local church, as I said, in NYI ministry. But I knew it was more than just organizing events. It was about pastoring the youth and helping the members of the youth group to be involved in the mission. In my specific case, it was about equipping them and encouraging them to be part of the mission.
And so after that, you stayed in Mexico for a period of time and continued to use your administration skills and your pastoral skills to help out with NY in Mexico. Tell
Yes.
us a little about that journey and kind of how the structure of that and how we think about it. I'm thinking about our audience, listening to this as a global
Hmm.
church, but you started becoming a more involved in the global church from being in Mexico. Is that correct?
It is correct. It is correct. And actually, I was serving in my local church. In especially in Latin America, eh, a ministry position known as a youth pastor. I mean, it's a recent culture. At that time, we didn't have like a youth pastors. We only had like NY leaders, NY president. So I was an NY president, an NY leader, but my ministry was a pastoral ministry. I knew it. Okay, so I tried to live out that call. But at the same time, I was serving at the district level. So I was invited to be part of the NY district team. And also eventually, I got elected as the NYI district president. So I was serving there. And I remember that while serving as an NYI district president, we had a camp, a youth camp. And we invited Dr. Christian Sarmiento to serve as the speaker at the event. So I had the opportunity to meet him, to talk with him, I shared with him my experience, my testimony, and the way that God was calling me. And even I remember during that camp, he preached. And for me, it was also a confirmation that I was ready to serve the Lord, well, uh, whatever whatever He wanted me to be or to do. So I was ready. And I remember that after that youth camp, like 2 months later, uh, he called me. He called me through the field strategy coordinator. He invited me to the field strategy coordinator. They had a need in the seminary in Mexico. The seminary in Mexico was located in Mexico City, like around about like 5 hours from Veracruz, where I lived at the time. So there was a need. They needed an administrator. So they were inviting me to go there and serve as administrator. And again, that was my background, the academic foundation that I had. So I was ready. So I immediately said, yes, count me in. And I moved from Veracruz to Mexico City. I served there for about 2 years. And at that time, also, I was invited to be the NYI coordinator for Mexico. So it was local church, district, and then the country. I was serving as the coordinator for the NYI ministries. And after 2 years, Dr. Christian Sarmiento, knowing my call and my experience, my testimony, he invited me to move to Guatemala. So I moved to Guatemala, where I lived for 6 years, serving as a missionary, involved in youth ministry, but also in church planting. So for me, it was also a time for continuing my education. My master's degree, it was a combination, some studies there in Guatemala, other courses I took in Sendas in Costa Rica. So it was part of the preparation, but also, fully involved in ministry. And well, yeah, that's part of
So
the
that's part of the journey. So,
development. Yeah.
so you mentioned when you got started, youth ministry was not something that was kind of fully ingrained or understood in your context. How did God use you to kind of reorient or orient your district and your field to be more involved in youth ministry? How did that kind of develop in Mexico and in Guatemala?
Yeah. Well, I knew that there was a need. And it was about also to enrich the culture, the ministry culture. Our seminaries didn't have a track on youth ministry. So now, 20 years later, or 26 years later, I can say that some of the seminaries in Latin America, they offer that track. And I'm just so happy and blessed of being part of that journey, collaborating with those institutions in order to offer this. And many other leaders have been part of this. But at the time, it was kind of like also a call. It's like, this is what God is asking me to do. So it's going to take a long time, but I'm willing to be part of this journey. So again, eventually, now serving in the regional level, I had the opportunity to have conversations with regional leaders that were in charge of the theological education. Is when everything started. I also started interacting or building relationship with other organizations connected to youth ministry here in the USA. Global NYI has been instrumental, because for me it was also to take advantage of what we already had in other universities, colleges. So learning from that, and also understanding that the reality in Latin America is different. So kind of like building that bridge. But I feel blessed of being part of that journey. It's still uh, is we still have how can I express this like the proper way? Okay, I would say we're still like in a baby stage, learning, but I
Yes.
think we're getting that momentum. Yeah, we're getting that momentum.
God is still using you to grow in that area. Is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a question I wanted to ask you later, but it seems like a good time to ask you now. What advice would you give, or what is it like for a new start church, or maybe a church that doesn't have a youth group? What advice or what tips would you give for someone to get that going? What's a good strategy to start developing youth ministry in a church or in a district that doesn't really have strong youth ministry?
Yeah. Uh, based on my experience, but also learning from others' experiences, is like prayer needs to be there. It's about praying for the youth that are going to be part of the youth ministry. And that's also connected to getting to know your community, going to those places where the youth are, so you can identify the needs and you can be more intentional in terms of praying for those needs that they have. Another thing that was super helpful for me, it was sharing this vision, this dream with others. So in that way, it wasn't just kind of like a task of one person, but it was a team working together. And even I realized at that time I needed a mentor because I was ready to do a lot of things, but I didn't have the experience. So I connected with someone who could help me. And many times I gave him the permission to correct me and tell me, David, that's not the way you should do that. But again, just having that group and being part of that group. So I think that was really good, and learn from others. I think this is super important. We are not competing with other churches, with other youth leaders or youth pastors. I think building that relationship was key for me, and I would encourage those who are, I mean, sensing or feeling that call from God to get involved in youth ministry or to start at your ministry. Yeah, please. I mean, connect with others, with parents, with the lead pastor. For me, it was key. I shared this dream with my pastor, and he supported me. And at that time, my pastor was 74 years old, so it was like, okay, it's good to have the support from my lead pastor. So it was good.
September 19th marks 100 years of NYI.
Yes.
I was looking at some of the prayers and listening to them this morning on your Facebook, on NYI's Facebook. But tell us a little bit about your celebration. What are you guys doing to commemorate that?
Well, we started the celebration during the Global NYI convention in June. So we were able to highlight some of those key moments in the history of the NYI. I mean, having delegates representing the 6 regions, the 50 fields was really good, was meaningful. But that was just the kickoff. We encouraged the regions and the fields to customize the party, right? The celebration. And I'm just excited seeing what's happening around the world. Like, for example, Africa, they have different activities. One of those was encouraging people, inviting people to plant trees as a way to also to contribute as good stewards. Also, they are recognizing those who were before them in leadership positions through interviews and having like online gatherings. Even tonight, I will be part of 2 Zoom gatherings, online gatherings. The Caribbean field in the Mesoamerica region, they are having a party. The Asia Pacific, they are having a training, but also a gathering celebrating God's grace and favor over, I mean, the NYI ministry during all this time. And specifically as the Global NYI team, we recognize that prayer is key because it's a movement that started from God's heart. So we need to make sure that we're aligning ourselves. We're thankful for what God has done over all these years, but we need to embrace the future with all the challenges, the opportunities, and we need to make sure that we are following God, that we're joining God in his mission and not just us coming with ideas, activities, but it's about God. And this week, we wanted to focus on joining in prayer. So starting on Sunday, the 17th, we prayed with for the needs, also celebrating the global ministry, and then we assign individual days for the regions. And on Saturday, we'll be closing. Saturday the 23rd, we'll be closing with the US and Canada region. So that's what we are doing.
Coming out of your NYI convention, what were some of the themes going forward into the quadrennium? Can you share us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Specifically connected to the convention, we had the theme, Jesus is Lord. But I'm trying to be super intentional on this. Jesus is Lord is not just like quadrennial theme. or the theme of the convention is our DNA, is part of the NYI and the Church of the Nazarene. I would say is the foundation and the filter for everything we do. And specifically when I think of like our youth, the teenagers, and they are, I mean, wrestling with this question about identity. It's part of the life. They are living in this stage in life and trying to respond to the question, who am I? And recognizing that Jesus is my Lord helps me to respond to that question. Because when I could respond to the question, to whom do I belong? I mean, it kind of like unfold uh, like the foundation for me to say, this is what I want to be. My identity is based on Christ, his character, his mission, the values of his kingdom. So I think Jesus is Lord. It's our DNA. So again, it's not just a quadrennial theme, but it's what NYI is about. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your core strategies of evangelism, discipleship, and leadership development. How are you involved in that, and how does that connect with the local church?
Yeah. Uh, with other leaders, we have been working on this for years, and uh, we came with these three core strategies. And that doesn't mean that we're limiting local churches or region or districts in terms of other strategies that they could incorporate or integrate to the ministry philosophy and the strategy that they have. But what we're saying, this should be the standard, this should be the minimum. And it's not a process. And I want to clarify this because we may get confused and think that this is a process that we're recommending. I mean, like first we evangelize, then we disciple, then we develop our leaders. What I see, kind of an illustration, is like it's like the rope made of three cords. They need to go together because when we talk about evangelism, we're talking about discipleship. And when we're talking about discipleship, we're talking about we are developing leaders. We're equipping disciples to make disciples. So the three of those three core strategies, they need to go together. And it's the standard, it's what we're sharing. A local NYI should have those columns, those core strategies. And from there, you can add other elements. It's about being present, being Jesus for others. It's about joining other Christians to strengthen their faith by praying, by studying the Bible, worshiping, and serving together. And as I said, it's also helping our youth to be part of the mission, God's mission, equipping them and, yeah, involving them, offering opportunities to serve.
God has used you as an administrator. Probably you're feeling quite a bit right now because Global NYI helps facilitate and host many events. What are the next regional events that are coming up that you're working on right now?
Each region has like a different events in different levels. Uh, the context and the nature of the regions are different. Like, for example, when we talk about the USA and Canada region, we're talking about two countries. And mostly, I mean, we speak the same language. English is kind of like the common language. But then when we consider other regions, and let me just use the example of Mesoamerica. I was just there last week. We were celebrating also the centennial of NYI there, and that's a small country. When you compare Mesoamerica with Eurasia or Asia Pacific, I mean, Mesoamerica only has 34 countries, but they have like 4 or 5 languages, and it's really hard to have like a regional NYC. Though they are going to have an NYC next year, so they are planning to have an NYC, but they have a different strategy. They have more like NYCs at the field level, because also when you're talking about traveling from one country to another country, it's really hard for like teenagers or minors to travel. So most of those events are focused on young adults. So the dynamic is different, but they have those events. And as a global NYI office, we come alongside them, we facilitate the processes. One of the really good things about the global NYI team is that we share best practices. It's like we're doing this.
Right.
This is something that we are uh, using, is working. We share with other regions. They have those resources available. That doesn't mean that they need to implement or adopt those adopt those resources in the same way that other regions are using, but they have access to that. And for me, it's really good. Just learning together, working together. And as a Global NY office, we serve as the facilitators. We encourage those connections. And also, in many cases, we offer like training opportunities. We're part of those events. And I'm talking about NYCs, but also we have some trainings, leadership development trainings, Bible quizzing tournaments. So we're part of that. But again, facilitating and resourcing our regions.
And NYI has done online events as well. Is that something in the post-pandemic world that has become more frequent? Tell us a little about the journey, the online event that was hosted a few years back.
Well, the journey was an event that happened in 2021. And uh, I, I want to make a distinction between the event and the resources. In collaboration with the other ministries and the Global Ministry Center, specifically with NDI. We partner with them, but understanding that the journey of grace is a discipleship framework for the whole denomination. So NYI contributed creating youth discipleship resources, again, connected to the journey of grace. So we came with the idea of having an online event to introduce these resources, to present these resources. And this event happened in August 2021. We had over 40,000 youth attending the event. It was an online. It was streamed 3 times via YouTube. And I'm saying 40,000 youth, but still, when you compare that with the membership of NYI, I mean, I just recognize that there is a lot to do. We still need a lot to do, and we're working on that.
Right.
But the resources are there, and there are multilingual resources. I mean, we created the resources in 12 languages. Those resources are available on our website. It's nazarene.org/NYI journey. So those resources are for free there. So we're encouraging local churches to use that. And again, it's part of our DNA. Similar to Jesus is Lord, the journey of grace is not just a program or a set of lessons. It's our discipleship framework. And we have the commitment also of adding resources in annual basis. So last year we created some audio versions of a devotional for youth, like focusing on teenagers, but also young adults. So we are making those resources available for free. And then next year we'll be offering some resources focusing on mentoring, creating that culture of mentoring and helping our leaders to come alongside the younger generations and help them to follow Jesus, but also to invite others to follow Jesus. So that's kind of like the description of the journey of grace, and the journey as an event.
So as you develop these resources, will there be other online events or events that you launch these at, or is there any plans for doing more things like that in the future?
Yeah, we don't know yet, but we're encouraging regions to do that. It was kind of like the global ministry, kind of like setting the example, serving as a model and working together, because the regional leaders, they were part of this. It wasn't just an effort of the Global NY, the Global NY office here in Kansas, but it was an effort from the different regional offices working together. So that experience helped them to take this to the regional level and to the field level. And they are doing this, they continue doing this. So it's more about us now coming alongside and be there to support them. But yeah, the regions are filled, they are doing this. Yeah. So no plans in the short term to have a, yeah.
In closing, what are your kind of hopes for the next few years of NYI? What is your hopes for the Church of the Nazarene? What are the things that we can be praying about with you and for you?
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited, and yesterday I was sharing with the staff here in the Global Ministry Center, but also with our regional leaders. I'm super excited about the third wave. It's a leadership conference that is going to happen in January 2025. We're seeing results coming from that event. This event started in 2004 in Quito, Ecuador. And after that, we went to South Africa, Johannesburg. And the idea, and then we went to Thailand, then Costa Rica. In 2019, we went to India, and we're kind of closing the cycle. This is the first cycle that we're closing, and the USA and Canada region is going to be the host region. So in January of 2025, we'll be in Florida, and the goal is to gather about 300 emerging young leaders. And when I'm saying young leaders, I'm not limiting the participation of leaders who are involved in youth ministry. I'm talking about young leaders that may be involved in compassionate ministries, in discipleship, in NMI, in cross-cultural ministry, in communications, worship. We want those leaders to come together for worshiping, for learning together, to also share the needs that they have in the fields. But especially we want to focus on this journey of leadership and the journey of grace. And we're shaping the vision of NYI is again, Third Wave is one of my favorite events. And if you can join us in prayer, because I'm praying for those who are going to be part of this, because they're already involved in leadership positions in the local church, in the district level. But I tell you, in a few years, they are going to be also helping and being part of the leadership teams at the regional level, and why not the global level. So we want to be intentional in the way that we're investing in them.
So what's the targeted age group for that Third Wave conference in Florida?
It's 18 through 29.
29, okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. We'll be praying for that for sure. Well, we're so thankful that you could join us, and we're excited for the 100 years of NYI, hopefully for 100 more, right?
Yes. Others will be celebrating, but
yes, yeah, well, maybe God will allow us to live that long, huh?
Okay.
Well,
I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. I really appreciate that. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you for listening to the Holiness Today podcast. If you enjoyed this production and wish to hear more, visit holinesstoday.org/podcast or find us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.